you haven't got a mic. Oh, that's a bit rude, isn't it? There you go.
I don't want a mic.
No. Well, that might be a problem for a panel, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Right, so people-based marketing as a blast from the past. Before we kick into it, let us start with some introductions. Karen.
Hi everyone, I'm Karen Eccles. I'm Chief Commercial Officer of the Telegraph, and I work with Camilla of the amazing panel this morning, who's our data strategist.
Hello everyone, I'm Nav. I head up advertising at Gumtree, and keen to get involved in this panel on people-based marketing.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Luke Fenney. I lead LiveRamp's addressability business across Europe and randomly Brazil. I am responsible ultimately for all of our publisher partnerships across the ecosystem.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I want to kick off this discussion by defining people-based marketing and understanding is it the same people-based marketing we were talking about, 5, 6, 7 years ago? And if it's not, how has it evolved? If it is, kind of why is it different from what it was back then? Luke, I'm going to ask you to define your perspective on what people-based marketing is and how has it changed?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't really know what it was 6 or 7 years ago, to be honest.
Karen does. She'll tell you.
Karen will fill us in there. I think people-based marketing, from my perspectives, is really what I think Facebook, Google, and a lot of the social platforms have been doing very well for many, many years. And that's allowing brands to bring their people-based data, whether that be CRM, online data, to the publisher to find those people and deliver a personalized message to that audience. Things like Facebook custom audiences, TikTok custom audiences, really allowing the brand to bring the data to the party so that they can then deliver their messages to those users. And so different from publisher first-party data strategies where publishers are building audience segments, it's really facilitating the brand to be able to bring their audience and identify them.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a great definition. I'm sure everyone agrees with that in the room. Karen, when we first spoke about it, you said, what Facebook, I think of Facebook and Atlas when I think of, yes, elaborate.
So we had a kind of smile about this. So I was working at a video marketing platform called Innovid about 6, 7 years ago, and we were working quite closely with Atlas, which was the Facebook ad server at the time. And people-based marketing was a kind of big thing that we were talking about. And particularly, do you remember that fantasy that everybody had about hyper-targeting and hyper-personalization? Oh, yes. And, kind of 80,000 different creatives created on the fly and that kind of stuff. So, yes, we were talking about that, but I don't think we're talking about that now. I suppose for us, it's the thinking about targeting in terms of individuals, people, rather than proxies like cookies, which we all know, I hope, third-party cookies were never really fit for purpose and didn't really represent individuals. So being able to be relevant, being able to be targeted and driving better results through people-based marketing in that sense, I hope.
Brilliant, absolutely. I think it makes a lot of sense. And, Rob just talked about going audience first, people first. There's been a lot of the conversation today talking about the human behind the ad and not just looking at kind of what the brand wants or the publisher wants out of it. Now, from your perspective at Gumtree, what are the implications of a people-first approach versus a targets-first approach or a scale-first approach?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, from a publisher standpoint, it's around extracting value from the user to drive authentication, right? So we want to move to a decentralized approach where the data isn't attached to a third-party ID, effectively true people-based marketing, which is going to limit scale, but essentially will be compliant and future-proofed as we move to the next iteration of people-based marketing. So from our point, I know we're going to maybe touch on this, it's around really putting the individual behind the experience of your platform first, and which you'll drive more user value and be able to capture more users.
Great. And Luke, from your perspective, what education do you think is required for both publishers and for brands to enable them to really kind of effectively implement true people-based marketing? And what questions should they be asking tech providers like you?
Yeah, so I think a lot of brands have been doing people-based marketing for many years now. They just haven't probably done it with the majority of the publishers in this room. Facebook and others have made it very easy. So I think a lot of brands have a good understanding of what they can do in those environments, and I think there's a massive opportunity for publishers to be able to replicate that across the open web, the premium web, however you want to refer to the non-walled gardens. I think for publishers, it's really understanding how people-based marketing fits into your your sales toolkit. I think people are kind of tying people-based marketing as a solution to the deprecation of the third-party cookie. But the reality is that it's one of many solutions. There's no silver bullet that is going to solve for that problem long term. And so many publishers, you go to any of their media kits on their websites, they have a plethora of opportunities for brands to buy from them, different targeting options, whether that be contextual, first-party audience. I think there's an opportunity for publishers to also add people-based marketing into that. And so I'd love to see in the future publishers like Gumtree. You can go buy Gumtree custom audiences or Telegraph custom audiences, or if you'd prefer to buy their first-party kind of audience data as well, there's that option as well. And so I think that's kind of the world we need to get to. In terms of the questions that need to be asked of, I guess, technology, it's really understanding how can that be facilitated, and in Europe, how can that be facilitated in a privacy-safe way? And so we would argue at LiveRamp we have solutions for this. This is happening already. It works across all environments. It's not limited. It doesn't use cookies. It's not impacted by these changes that are coming. But I think ultimately there's a huge opportunity for publishers to start capturing a lot of that people-based marketing budget that has been going to Instagram, that's now going to TikTok. You've got an opportunity to bring that into your fold.
Yeah, absolutely. And Karen, from your perspective, the Telegraph, custom audiences, people-first mindset, privacy-first mindset, how are you approaching that? And how are you then working with brands and agencies to get them to understand how they can work with your audience best and they can come at you with an audience-first approach?
Absolutely. So for anyone who doesn't know, the Telegraph is in its 5th year as a subs-first business. So we used to have a sort of, advertising at scale model, as in the majority of our business was run. I bought these in Boots. I can't see through them. Take them out. They cost me £2 though, and I haven't broken them yet, and that's a good thing. It's a plus. But seeing through them is a secondary thing. So we're in the 5th year of that strategy. We've moved away from creating advertising inventory at scale, and that being the main revenue source of the business. So now subscriptions are our main revenue driver, but commercial, and particularly digital commercial, is a really important part of that, and that's all been driven by the subs business as well. So we've been on a journey, we always talk about journeys, but over the last 3 years of making sure that our ad business is completely reshaped beneath subscriptions. And that meant partly, kind of building new products, building new narratives, building new measurement, building a new user experience on the site. I agree with so much of what Rob said earlier, because if you have a subs business, you have to put the user and the person first when you think about the experience. Advertising cannot be an aggravator. It has to be something that's complementary to the experience. So we have built that. And as a subs business, then obviously we have a large number of identifiable logged-in readers. We have people who return, who read news, but also read a lot of lifestyle sections. So we have a lot of behavioural signals that we can pick up, as well as that deterministic, kind of first-party data. And then there's a lot of contextual targeting that we can wrap around that as well. So Camilla, who was on, I think, this stage earlier, has been working for 3 or 4 years to build up first-party data products. And we've had to build all of those on a foundation of how does this serve the user? What are our principles? So privacy, compliance, protecting our subscribers, protecting the subs experience. We can't do anything for money if it's going to not be a nice experience for the subscriber. So we have to put everything through that lens. But actually, when you do all of that, the results you drive for advertisers are better. And so I think we've brought the conversation back round to, rather than the scale that advertisers used to think they were looking for, what are the outcomes we're driving, what are the results that they're looking for, and then proving that using first-party audiences might be a slightly smaller activation, but it actually works better and drives better results. I don't know if that was the question.
I don't know if that was the question either, but it was a good answer. I enjoyed it, and I'm pleased that your leg now has perfect vision, so that's we're making progress here.
Yes, my knee can see beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that it's absolutely fascinating, really, to the concept that you would take ad units off a page, and then advertisers get better results as a result of that?
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't see that putting more ads on the page results in more revenue. So we think that advertising first wasn't better for advertisers, but actually wasn't better for publishers either.
Interesting. And now I want to come to you because obviously completely different business model, completely different company. How are you, how are you going down a people-first approach, a privacy-first approach, and how are you then working with your advertiser and agency clients to get them to work with you with that mindset?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we're in a fairly fortunate position in the sense that if you are a buyer or seller, you do need to log in to either buy or sell. So we're lucky versus some other publishers which potentially rely on social or SEO to drive traffic, because you do want to limit the barriers or the friction with users, or any good UX person will tell you, because you want them to obviously engage with your platform. So with that in mind, from our perspective, and Karen, touching on your point earlier, yeah, we've seen a similar results from reducing ads on our page, and as third-party cookies do become deprecated, you know, the spray and pray kind of policy of just having ads everywhere, which you get on some publishers, will disappear anyway, due to attribution being challenged generally. So we're already moving to that approach. One of the things that held us back from moving to an app-first approach, so you know, eBay, Amazon, you have the app, right? One of the reasons we didn't move to an app is because we monetize responsive so much better, because obviously cookies. And however, and Karen, you'll probably touch on this as well, is that our app users are much more sticky. We know that they're much more engaged users, with just the yields are much lower than on responsive. But we're rebuilding our new apps now to kind of move forward to that people-based approach in general, because obviously to have the app, you need to be logged in, and in which case we can provide more customized solutions for clients and educate agencies about the value of app inventory, which we're not there yet, given its addressability and attribution challenges, but that's where we need to get to and how we consult with our clients.
Great. And Luke, I want to understand, kind of off the back of what Karen and Nav have just said, what does success look like with people-based marketing? What metrics should publishers and marketers be looking at? And how does that change from where they've maybe focused too much on the third-party cookie before?
Yeah, so I think for a publisher, I think a lot of the pushback that we kind of see around people-based marketing from publishers is that we don't have many users logged in. And the reality is that it's not about just logging in, it's about finding ways to create that value exchange so that a user authenticates with you. And so login is just one of many different mechanisms that can be used to generate that authentication event. I think if you look at publishers like Condé Nast, people don't really log into their publications, but in the US, more than 10 million people subscribe to their newsletters and click through to the content within at least once a month. So massive amounts of audience that's generating authentication without a login. And so for a publisher, I think if you have an authenticated audience that is anywhere from 10 to 30% of your overall user base, that's fantastic. Those users are the most highly engaged users that you have on site, and you should be doing everything you can to ensure that it's a pleasant experience for them being there, and they will probably generate more than 50% of your total ad inventory. So looking at it from that perspective around like how do you develop a strong authentication strategy and kind of looking towards those metrics is key. I think in terms of like ultimate success from a publisher's perspective, it is one, I think being able to capture budgets from brands that you haven't been able to work with before. I think the rise of retail media networks brings a whole lot of new budget to the digital market that was previously just going to linear TV, to the social platforms. I think there's an opportunity to start capturing budget from CPGs that are working with retail media networks in a people-based approach. And I think retail media networks like Boots, who've publicly stated that 60% of their ad spend is now going to be based on their first-party audience in terms of their known people, that really is kind of changing the landscape. And so capturing those budgets, but I think also for publishers not getting complacent about the brands that you are capturing budgets from today, a lot of the brands are evolving their media strategies rapidly and incorporating a lot more people-based marketing into their strategies today. So to future-proof getting that spend, I think that's also like a key area for success. I haven't touched on the brand side, but I recognise I've spoken for a while.
I think that probably covers everything, though. Should we be getting everyone to log on? Is that the focus now? What about the anonymous web, the unauthenticated web, whatever people are calling it?
It's unrealistic to expect everyone to log on to every single website. I'd love to know how many people log on to golf.com. Rob gave hashed emails a bit of a bashing just before, but I think if you can get around that 30% mark, that is fantastic. It's going to help generate authentication across the majority of your inventory. And as I said before, there's no silver bullet. Publishers really need to focus on 4 key areas for monetization in a post-cookie world. One is continue to invest in your first-party data strategy using your DMP. Publishers have been investing in this strategy for a while and should continue to double down on that. Authentication is really the next area that we think is going to be the gold standard for addressability in a post-cookie world. And today, 50% of the internet is already post-cookie anyway. And so figuring out that authentication strategy is key. Contextual, we had a panel on contextual before. Contextual will continue to have a place. And then there's the 4th bucket, which is all of the standard kind of sponsorships and that sort of thing as well. And so I think if you can have strong strategies across those 4 areas, and for many publishers, that means now focusing on how do I monetize within that authenticated area, I think that's key. But no, it's unrealistic to expect everyone to log in.
And I want to then touch upon scale and what that looks like, because there are some publishers and certainly brands in terms of their targeting strategies that want scale at all costs and want ROAS or ROI at all costs and want to be able to clearly see, okay, I put this in, I got this out. With the deprecation of third-party cookies and with the fact that we can't fully rely on first-party data, we have to think about the other side of the coin as well. How can we, firstly, as publishers, speak to our senior stakeholders and explain to them this is a whole new world we're operating in? We can't offer you that anymore. This is how we need to work and try and get, Rob talked about it, kind of this company saying, oh, we're now a data-first company, we're hey, and then every team goes off and does their own thing. How do you stop that from happening? And then also from the client perspective, how do you educate them as to what they need to, what success needs to look like for them? And I hate the phrase, what success look like, but I keep saying it. What are the metrics they should be focusing on? And how do you communicate that with senior stakeholders? There was a lot of questions in that, but hopefully that all made sense. Karen, I want to come to you first.
I was going to look at my shoes so you didn't, because that's such a big question.
I'm really sorry. I can go to Nav first, who'll look equally bewildered if you'd like.
Where do you want me to start?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? The scale thing, how do you, let's go focus on scale.
Okay, so I talk about this sometimes when we go back to kind of 3 or 4 years ago when we started really leaning into the sub-strategy. And I think a reason why the Telegraph has been very successful at pivoting our business in a relatively short amount of time is because there was an absolute relentless focus on it. So everybody in the business was focused on us becoming a subs business, including everybody in advertising as well. So we had to think really early about what the measures of success would be. So for one thing, we've been measuring the success of our campaigns based on attention and engagement, as well as click-through rate. We've been doing that for about 4 years now, and on almost every campaign above a certain sort of quite low minimum spend level, just so we have enough data to have robust results. But that means 2 things, I suppose. One is that we can provide the proof and transparency to clients, so we can talk about here are a number of other clients in your vertical who have done this. This maybe is the targeting that we started with for a campaign, but then during the campaign we were able to bring these insights in. We were able to add these kind of maybe quite niche audience segments. We were able to add contextual, and this is how we've then beaten the KPIs. This is how, actually in the end, as well as attention metrics and engagement being good, we've been able to maybe double CTR from what we would have seen previously. But we focused on those results rather than the scale of inventory that's needed, because actually scale is just another proxy. It's about what the amount of impressions we think we need in order to drive a particular result. And the reason why scale was so scaled previously was because there was so much wastage baked into that. So I think if you can come back to kind of what are the results, what are we really trying to achieve, and make it feel safe, kind of test together, optimize along the way. So to another one of Rob's points, we've changed our ad ops team to campaign planning, because the setup of campaigns is not as important as the insight that they put in once campaigns are booked into the setup of the activation, and then the optimizations that we do along the way, and then the recommendations for the future campaigns. So I think if we can start working really closely with brands like that, then we can work out together that we might not need the scale to drive the same results that they would have thought at the outset.
Interesting. And Nav, I won't ask you the same convoluted question, but I will ask you kind of, we are in an economic downturn of sorts. It is more difficult to try to communicate the challenges around what we can do with data collection, how we can build audiences and with a privacy-first mindset, and how we can work with advertisers and give them return on their investment. How are you having those conversations internally? Are there challenges there?
The internal conversation is fairly straightforward in the sense that we just need to prepare, right? As soon as third-party cookies are deprecated in Chrome, we can expect yields to decline by 50%, just what we're seeing in Safari, right, from an open market or programmatic perspective. And that's all fine, but we need to start developing strategies to cater for that, whether it be trying to drive login and authentication, where there will be piece or value chain with advertisers, or it's about developing custom formats or new formats and insights that you can then inform direct spend or P&P spend with clients. So the harder conversation is with brands and marketeers themselves, right? And that's what's driven through the macroeconomic situation you mentioned, is that there is increasing need for ROI and measurement, right? And that's driving all this, the practices that we see at the moment is ultimately, how can I drive the most reach for the least price as possible? And that's always going to back out much more effective than someone reading an article on financial savings on the Telegraph, because you'll charge a price for that, rightly so. If you're executing that buy at 20p CPM, it's never going to compete, right? And that's where we're at with third-party cookies. So it's about now informing or speaking to the marketeers about the value of your environment and the value of your user, getting back to the people-based approach, and actually not trying to compete with a binary number of £100 CPA, and instead look at it as in it's going to cost a lot more to drive a result with this user, but the long-term value from driving that customer is going to be so much more effective when it comes to word of mouth and all the other value that getting a customer on is worth. So that's the really difficult conversation that we won't nail. We'll only nail that when I guess third-party cookies are deprecated.
Yeah, interesting. And Luke, from your perspective and where you sit in the industry, are you seeing the same things that Nav and Karen are talking about in terms of sometimes the difficult conversations about, well, we can't get that scale anymore, we have to go on this road instead? And are you, how are you going with having those conversations, and what role can you play in helping the education piece for the senior stakeholders in those businesses?
Yeah, I think scale is always a talking point, and kind of coming back to my point before, I think publishers underestimate how much scale they do have for people-based marketing today. And I think one is like just that internal education around the kind of the strength of like those relationships you have with those users, and kind of what that means in terms of your overall kind of inventory pool. But yeah, I think there's definitely a massive opportunity to be educating people around the fact that it's not just about scale for scale's sake anymore. It's like that is what the big platforms do. I think publishers put so much investment into premium content. They create these very personalized experiences for their users, and I think you need to kind of capitalize on what your strengths are. And scale for scale's sake is really not the game anymore. As a publisher, you have the right to develop a relationship with your readers, your users, your consumers, whatever you want to call them, and understanding how you can exploit that, that's the wrong word, how you can monetize that, how you can use that in a privacy-safe way.
Slip.
Jeez. Is absolutely key.
And, Rob talked about give a publisher a hug, let's call it give a publisher a hug day. Is people-based marketing a real opportunity here, or is it, we have to... We have no choice. We have to do something. Like, is this the only real option? Are our backs against the wall as publishers, or actually is this a really good opportunity for us to go, right, marketers, this is how we're going to work from now on. This is what you need to know about how we can build our audiences and how you can target them and how you can make the most of our readers and get the most off them. Karen?
Yes, I think there was like the OMP was like a hyper warehouse of candy at one point for advertisers and publishers occupied, a really small premium stall in there, kind of waving our flags and getting everyone to come by and buy something, was quite difficult. But there are more direct conversations with advertisers, with clients themselves, and really meaningful conversations with agencies now. And for us, this has just been like, waiting for Christmas, waiting for the deprecation of third-party cookies, because that addiction to scale and the money being funneled off elsewhere will continue until, I think we're at the crux where real change happens. We're seeing so a lot more of those direct conversations based on direct and PG particularly. PMPs, we've been, to be honest, trying to scale for a long time. It seems to be quite hard to do that, and I hear that from other publishers as well. But PG, we're in our best year ever. Direct is up year on year. And partnerships as well. So a lot of brands wanting to be able to utilize, because obviously the wealth of first-party data we have, the other side of that coin is first-party insights, which are absolutely gold dust, because then we can tell a brand who understands their customers very well what that same customer, not to the individual, not kind of name and address, but what the profile of that same customer is doing when they're reading a brand with a Telegraph. So here are their kind of habits. This is the time of day. This is where their passion points are. This is what they're particularly engaged in. And then we can write briefs for partnerships together. And we see that approach again being more effective, not at the same scale necessarily that we were experiencing 3 or 4 years ago. So we feel really optimistic and confident, albeit in the market conditions, about how it is to be a publisher right now in the market. I think it's better than it was 3 or 4 years ago. That
is so interesting. Nav, do you agree?
Yeah, totally agree. And I think we play a really critical role to help the blind, I suppose, process that advertisers are going to see when it comes to ad delivered to actually did a user go and buy that product, and whether that be with insights or custom creative, where actually the experience happens more on the publisher platform versus going offline, because that journey is blind essentially without an addressable audience, an authenticated audience. So, but there's still value in that browse, right? Not, as you said, 30% is a good rate. That other 70% is still extremely valuable. So we should leverage first-party data and understand a bit more about what the user's doing on that platform, but also how they're interacting with a potential prospective brand in that site, whether it be engagement, whether it be configurations, thinking from a car manufacturer, for example, editing the color, changing the wheel spec. All those things should happen maybe a bit more with publishers in collaboration through partnerships or more dynamic advertising, and maybe that means moving away from standard IAB in general, which will probably happen as a consequence of cookie deprecation anyway.
The second coming of publishers?
The way you actually phrased the question, my answer was no, but then Karen said yes. So I don't know if I misinterpreted the question, but I think the point is that people-based marketing is really just another tool. It's not going to save everyone. It's not going to solve for all of the problems in a post-cookie world, but it's a tool that is real and that publishers can capitalize on today. And publishers like Telegraph have been working on kind of an authentication strategy for many years. Gumtree, it comes naturally. Joe mentioned earlier 5 million registered users on independent. Publishers are investing in this, and it's very real. And I think the question you need to ask yourself is, if an American Express comes to you and says that they want to target all of their gold card holders today, can you do that? Can you execute on that? Or is your answer no, but you can offer them something else? If you can start to be able to say yes to those questions, I think you're in a position to start capturing new budgets, especially in this particular point in time where there's so much pressure on brands to get that return on ad spend. The economic conditions are really putting that pressure on them, and I think driving that efficiency is super key. So yes and no is the answer.
Yeah, yes and no to a question you weren't really sure what the question was in the first place. Yeah, that's cool. We are running out of time, we're over time, but that's fine. That wasn't my fault, that was Rob Beeler's fault, he ran over time. But one final quick question for each of you is kind of, what is your advice to the room? What's the one key thing you want to get across about the importance of a people-based approach? As a publisher, as a marketer, kind of whatever, we've got a mixture of people in the room. What's the one thing you want to get across? Luke, kind of straight back to you for this one.
I'm probably going to repeat something I've already said. I think as a publisher, It is acknowledging you have the right to develop a relationship with a user where you know who they are. And under GDPR, you still have, and consent, you have the ability to use that in a privacy-safe way. And thinking about an authentication strategy is key. Whether you know it or not, you probably have one in place today. It might not be run from the commercial team or the advertising team, but someone in your business is thinking about newsletters, about commenting on articles, various different solutions, and understanding that, I think, is key.
Great. Nav?
Yeah, echoing those points Luke made, for all the advertisers and brands in the room, potentially, thinking from that perspective, I think it's about collaboration with publishers and understanding that KPIs or how you measure campaign may need to change, and actually looking at more quality-based outcomes or reassessing how you would value the quality of a conversion in an addressable world where it's not going to be as scalable. I think it's going to be really important.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Karen, finally.
Thank you, because I'm still thinking.
Got some more time? We can just play a song while you
just
think?
come back next year. I think as a publisher with a sub-strategy, the advice I would give to other publishers who are thinking about it is to relentlessly put the subscriber or put the person at the heart of people-based marketing first. Because if you do that and you're thinking about them and you're building for them, then everything else will follow. The value of advertising, the right partnerships, the right insight, the right data, and then we can take that data. It can be scaled up. There are collaborations with other publishers, or for example, the Telegraph with other news brands with Ozone. So you can build that commercial business out from that foundation. I think if you don't respect the person at the heart of all of this, then eventually it's going to fall down.
That was a positive note to end things on. Things won't fall down because of everything that Karen just said. If you focus on those things, it's very important. Thank you so much. That was a really interesting conversation. Luke, Nav, Karen, everyone give them a round of applause. Thank you.